All right, today I want to talk about process, right? The process of drawing and painting basically anything. And once again, a lot of it boils down to how we think about it. Now, if this is our goal, this is our finished piece of artwork. Now, a lot of times we think in steps, right? Step one, we do this. Step two, we do this. Step three, we do this. And eventually, like a formula, it leads to a final piece of artwork. Well, sometimes things aren't that simple. Sometimes we're not in the mood to do thumbnail sketches. Sometimes we're not in the mood to do studies from reference. So instead of thinking about it in steps, it's more like a grocery list, right? It really doesn't matter what order you get your groceries in, how you check them off the list, whether you're running back and forth around the store, as long as you're checking things off. So think of it that way. Think of it more like a checklist, that eventually everything needs to get checked off. And I'm going to do these in no particular order. So first up is materials. The media is what materials you're using to make marks with, right? Graphite, charcoal, oil, India ink, watercolor. Media is plural. Just a little side note. Medium is singular, media is plural. Don't say mediums. You sound like an idiot if you do that. So surface is paper, canvas, brick wall, concrete slab, whatever you're drawing and painting on. Okay, so those are your materials. Research. This is where a lot of my students start to clench up, where they'll ask me how to draw something, and I'll say, all right, well, did you get reference? Go get your reference, let me see it. A lot of times I get that blank, doe-eyed look, because they didn't do research. They're drawing from their brain, or they're just drawing from, the computer monitor. And, if at all possible, draw from life. If that's not possible, draw from reference. Usually you need a combination, right? And I'm not just talking about reference when I talk about research, right? Research is reference, but it's also reading things. Right? Sometimes the artwork is based on your understanding of it. You have to, read a book, read an article. You might wind up interviewing people. You might have to watch a movie, a TV show, or a documentary. Technique. Now, when I say technique, this is kind of the style you're going to use. Pointillism, whether it's going to be what level of contrast you're going for. Is it, does it dip into an art movement, abstract, expressionistic? Is it a loose emotional line? Is it a very tight, precise drawing? So what style you're using. So that's your technique. Studies are where you solve drawing problems. Studies are where you figure out things like anatomy, perspective, likeness, texture, etc. Right? You might have the research, or you might have the reference photos, but that doesn't mean you know how to draw them. Rather than figure out how to draw them while you're doing your finished work, that's what your sketchbook is for. That's what other papers are for. Right? So practice the anatomy that you're going to need to know to complete the finished work. Make sure you understand how the perspective is going to work. If you're drawing a tree or a rock, practice drawing those textures. Whether or not you use your research, just practice drawing them, so when you go into your finished work, you're not going in cold. You have some practice. You don't have to know how to draw every last detail before you start the finished work, but you should have an idea of what you're getting into and how you're going to approach it. Now we have sketching. The way I think of sketching is really a way of generating ideas visually. It's a combination of brainstorming and studies. Okay, you're really looking for gesture, get the visual idea down on paper, and overall, just quantity. over quality. It's not a study. You're not trying to make a pretty drawing. You're just trying to get your idea down on paper visually. Okay? To go along with sketching, you have brainstorming. Brainstorming is usually written and sometimes in the form of a list. Remember, these ideas shouldn't be precious, right? You're not editing yourself at this stage. You just want to get everything down on paper. Get as much down on paper as you possibly can. You could edit afterwards. Okay, it's very difficult to engage both parts of your brain that generate ideas and that filter them out. Also, spending a lot of time in this area helps to avoid cliche. Now, cliches are usually, I'll give my my students a sketching exercise where they have, say 5 minutes with a topic, and they have a minute to do 5 drawings. I'm sorry, they have 5 minutes to do 5 drawings based on one topic. So, the first minute they'll start drawing. They'll try and get an idea down on paper. After a minute, I tell them to stop. They immediately start a new drawing. And by the end of the 5 minutes, they've drawn, they've made 5 different sketches, and they're just starting to get past the ideas that everyone in the room has come up with. Like, say, the topic is death. Well, the first sketch for almost all of them is going to be something to do with a casket, a tombstone, a skull, something like that. And the second one, there might be a little more variety in the class of what everyone draws. By the third, fourth, and fifth one, now they're really starting to branch off in different directions and break away from the cliches that everyone thinks about when they think about death or whatever the topic is. So brainstorming, whether it be written or whether it be text-based or sketching-based, is really important. This really can't be stressed enough. I mean, all of these are really all of these hold a lot of weight. This is a very important factor, and it's one that's neglected a lot. Another one that tends to be neglected a lot and my students groan when they see me start writing this on the board. But fuck them, it's important. Alright, thumbnail sketches is where you're thinking about the dimensions and orientation of your drawing surface. Alright. You're thinking about the rule of thirds. Alright, creating focal points. Alright, compositional focal points. There's a whole lot we could talk about composition. Okay, so orientation, dimensions, shape, rule of thirds. And you think about the arrangement of elements. I guess that goes along with composition too. These focal points, one way to create focal points and interest. Alright, an interesting piece is to think about contrast. Contrast in value and color. Okay, so this is your checklist, right? As long as you spend time with and give thought to each one of these, even if it's a little bit, even if it's a second's thought or it's already predetermined, as long as at some point you've made a decision. You may be doing a series, and you're using the same material for every piece. Well, you really don't have to think about this too much, but you thought about it at some point. Then you could focus on all these other things. So each one of these needs to be checked off. This process can be used almost, I personally think, regardless of what you're drawing, what you're painting, it involves these to some degree. and you have to make decisions and think about these, each one to some degree. All right, that's all I got for now. Send your questions to John Carmine at headinthegutter.com, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks.